So this video is for people who are concerned with the images of Palestinian babies who have been killed. They see these all over the internet, references to them all the time, and thereby show great frustration, not just at the war, but anger at Israelis, feeling that they have given disproportionate aggression and injustice toward Palestinians in Gaza. So in response to that, number one, their concern is coming from a good place. If this is how you feel, you should know that your feelings are shared with any good people on earth who don't want to see innocent people die. That is a natural reaction. But there's some questions that you need to ask yourself when you see references to Palestinian babies and images of dead babies, and then claims that this is a result of injustice by the Israeli military. Number one, you need to ask yourself, did you see any documented evidence, not just of a dead baby, but did you see documentation of an Israeli in the video representing the Israeli government going and putting a gun to the head of the baby and pulling the trigger? Did you see an Israeli representing the Israeli government going to a baby and slicing that baby's throat, raping that baby, burning that baby, or doing any act of violence directly to that baby? If you did not see that evidence, then what are you basing your belief on that that baby was targeted by the Israeli military? Unfortunately, more than likely, you're basing this belief on the assertion of supporters of an internationally recognized terrorist organization. So now we have to ask ourselves, why are you choosing to believe the claims of internationally recognized terrorists? And why do you have outrage for this while you have no outrage for documented video and eyewitness testimony of the Hamas organization, which is embedded in the Gazan population, proudly, not inadvertently killing Jewish babies because they're Jewish, not inadvertently killing them while targeting Israeli military targets, but rather intentionally killing Jewish babies by hand, point blank, with guns and knives, and even burning them, among many other civilian casualties on the Israeli side, targeted as civilians. No one here is denying that civilians on both sides die. But there is zero moral equivalence between civilian deaths when they are unfortunate collateral damage as a consequence of being in close proximity to military targets. That is completely unequivalent to going out of your way and slicing the throats of civilians or shooting them in the head point blank, knowing full well that they are civilians. So again, I ask you, who are upset and angry at Israel for images of dead Palestinian babies, did you see any evidence that an Israeli soldier went and shot that baby point blank? Did you see any evidence that an Israeli walked up to that baby and sliced its throat? I don't even know of any claims that these Palestinian babies have their throats sliced or that they were shot in the head point blank. All the images that I have seen have been babies in rubble, and you don't even really know where that baby in the rubble is. For all you know, it could be images of Syrian babies from Syria, from the Syrian war, that was an atrocity perpetuated on the Syrian population by the Syrian government, completely unrelated to the current conflict. Now, if you don't know exactly where these images are coming from, and you saw no Israeli in the video, why are you more upset at claims by anti-Semitic international terrorist organizations, HAMAS? Why are you more upset and angry at Israelis by believing the claims of this anti-Semitic group more than you are upset at the exponentially greater deaths of babies that are happening intentionally by other governments around the world, which happen to not be Israel? Why is your outrage disproportionately against Israel, even in the face of zero evidence? Don't forget, with the Shifa hospital explosion, within minutes of the explosion, which was later proven by government officials around the world, as well as journalists from around the world, proven to have not exploded that hospital, but was an explosion in a parking lot. Within moments of it happening, all of these media outlets around the world, even in the US, publicized the claim that 500 civilians had died. And they ran with that. How is it that Hamas was able to determine 500 people died within a moment of this explosion happening, not even in the actual hospital, which was the claim, but it took Israel months to calculate the precise amount of deaths as a consequence of Hamas atrocities against Israelis? That shows you the fundamental difference between the accuracy of the two groups. We later found out that at most maybe about 50 people died, max, from the parking lot explosion next to the Shifa hospital. And we found out that it wasn't even from an Israeli attack, documented even by Al Jazeera, that it was an attack that happened inadvertently, not an attack, an explosion that happened inadvertently from a misfired rocket from Hamas. The babies who die in this conflict in the images that you see, for all you know, these could be babies who died because of misfired missiles by Hamas. So again, I say it is a shame and it's sad when any infant dies. But if you use this as some sort of justification for hatred of Israel or Israelis in general, while turning a blind eye to the documented evidence of the atrocities perpetuated against civilians around the world, because Israel happens to not be involved in those conflicts, then I need to ask, what is the source of your anger? Disproportionate outrage based on lack of evidence is highly suspect of ulterior motives. May this entire conflict come to a swift end, and may we all have our eyes opened to reason and to intellectual honesty, condemning targeted killing of civilians on any side. And may we all have the eyes of our intellect and our hearts opened to recognize the zero moral equivalency between the sad, inadvertent death of civilians as opposed to the targeted butchering of civilians. Zero moral equivalency. And if you cannot understand the difference between the two, I'm sorry to say, but you yourself are morally corrupt. And I wouldn't trust you with my baby. Shalom uvracha.